Hey, folks, coming up on our Finding Better podcast, episode 167, we have an amazing story. I'm talking to Dr. Robert Wolf about his dad, who survived Hungarian concentration camps during World War II, came to the United States, became an obstetrician, and delivered over 10,000 babies. His story is incredible. Story of survival, story of hate, but most importantly, story of love and what he did in his life to not only find better, but to give back and to make the world better. It's an incredible story, unbelievably inspiring. Here we go. Hello, and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And this is where we help you find better. Now, what the heck is that? It's finding better by learning from people's experiences and their own wisdom of having been down the path that you're looking at going down, and they've already been there and done that. And it's all about finding better in life, finding better in love, finding better relationships, all kinds of things. And today I'm joined by Dr. Robert Wolf. He's a neuroradiologist, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about something that's really deep. And we're going to talk about something that may be upsetting to some folks. We're going to talk about hate. We're going to talk about how hate divides, how hate destroys, and hate is not about finding better. Robert wrote a book called Not a Real Enemy, and it's the true story of his father, a Hungarian Jewish man, and his experience during World War II, that terrible time in World War II. And, just to let you know where I'm kind of coming from, this whole podcast and everything that we're doing here is about lifting ourselves and lifting others. Because when you bring a little more love into the world and you lift others, it really does lift the world. And love makes things better. And like I said, hate divides, hate destroys. And in today's world, here's the upshot of it. We're seeing a rise of hate. We're seeing, I mean, in terms of anti-Semitism, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. That's what we're going to largely talk about today. What is anti-Semitism? It's hatred towards Jewish people. And with all the things that are going on today, Robert's book is so consequential as a reminder of what happened during World War II, because history has a way of repeating itself. And Robert and I have our kindred spirits because I also wrote a book. The book that I'm pointing to, it's called American Grit. And it was about the American concentration camps during World War II. Yes, America had concentration camps too. Now, just to clarify, I don't like to use euphemisms. I call it like I see it. They called the camps during World War II in Nazi Germany concentration camps. I call them genocidal extermination camps. Okay? They call the camps in the United States internment camps. Sorry, folks, they were concentration camps. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, Kind of reminding everybody, educating folks on what happened and what's happening in today's world, because, finding better is not about hating each other. It's just not. And it's about lifting others and understanding what's going on and preventing the kinds of things that have happened in the past from happening again. Okay, so I got to stop lecturing. I am so sorry, but as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this, and I know Robert is too. Robert, welcome to Finding Better, and thank you for sitting through all that.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate the invitation and the interview, and a special thanks to our mutual friend Kim Sorrell who introduced us. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're retired from medicine, and you took it upon yourself to write this book. What was behind that? What was your story in terms of making this the thing you felt you needed to do? What happened? What led you to this?
Well, the story itself is what did it. I mean, I've been radiology for 35 years now, 44 years all in when you include college and medical school. So that's a long time of work and sweat and sacrifice, time away from your family. But about 6 or 7 years ago, after my mom passed away, my mom and dad's they turned his autobiography literally into from paper and pencil to typewriter to disc. And after my mom passed away in 2016. Dad passed away in 1997. A historian friend of mine handed me the disc of my father's story and
Oh,
said, "Hey,
wow.
you really need to read this." And I didn't think much of it at the time, and I was busy taking care of my mom's affairs, and then decided to retire in 2017 and 2018. I went back to work until I recently retired. And that brought me to the story. That brought me to the book. So between reading cases, x-rays and ultrasounds at the time, I would load up my dad's disc and I would, well, I say that because it used to be everything, nuclear medicine,
Yeah,
MRI, CAT scan, the whole,
sure, sure.
barium enemas, procedures, all kinds of stuff. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyway, so my vector changed. When I read my dad's story now, between cases, I decided to turn his autobiography into a biography because there were 20 miracles
So
uh,
so now so
in
now so now
multiple states. I couldn't believe
as
it.
you
I mean,
yeah, as you're reading this, as you're reading this, did your dad ever talk about this stuff to you?
it's a great question. First half of my life, from time to time, mostly in a family argument, telling me how good Americans had it, how good and a spoiled child I was, and yada,
Yeah.
yada. Mostly probably when he was tired. Dad was an OBGYN, so he had oftentimes after hours baby delivery. But I could feel his fatigue. But he loved his work, though. By the way, you'd never know what happened to him. But yeah, they talked about it from time to time. My mom
Okay.
more so. And it
But
just
when
it more resonated with me the second half of my life than the first half for
but
sure.
when you read his autobiography, did you learn things that you didn't know?
On every page. I mean, I had no
Okay.
idea. I loved my dad. He was my hero. He's the reason I went into medicine, being a doctor himself, as was his father, a dentist and a doctor slash dentist. So the family goes back. But yeah, no, that once I read that story, I couldn't believe his determination, his resilience, the way he got through it without any signs of PTSD, and wondering how would I do this? How would any of us do this? It would be. It's remarkable how he went through all that and still remain strong and determined.
You know, I think about what's happening today. You know, uh, my dad never talked about his war experiences, right? And it's amazing how, you know, so many people, even in the American camps, um, they never talked about it because at least in the Japanese camps here in the United States, they felt shame. They were ashamed of their experience. And I'm sitting here going, why are you ashamed of your experience? Oh my gosh, right? But it's part of the Japanese culture. And for you know, there's reasons beyond that. I mean, people just don't want to relive the war and really bad experiences. But you know, I think it's up to us, you know, their sons and grandsons and granddaughters and everybody to keep their stories alive. And so tell us a little bit about your dad's just a little bit about your dad's journey. Obviously to learn about the 20 miracles, we need to buy your book. But you know what can people learn? What can you share with folks that people can learn from?
Well, I love what you say about shame because that's true. And converse, the opposite of my father is many people that didn't survive World War II. It wasn't just 6 million Jews; it was 50 to 60 million people that passed away during that war. LGBTQ and disabled and more and more, and not to mention communist Hungary and all the communist bloc over many years. But no, he was just a kid. He was a spoiled kid, and he was hauled off to forced labor camp late into World War II, 1943, 44, and they suffered there. He had his friend Frank, which was a big boost to him. He was his he was his morale, and a few other friends. And the enemies that you thought would be your friends turned out to be your enemies, and vice versa. So he had to experience that.
Oh
Humiliation is
wow.
something we talk about. Getting urinated on, getting beaten for purported malfeasance. That it was up to what the guard thought, or the captain, or the officer thought. It wasn't up to what the men did. They had to be on their best behavior. They had to wear those ridiculous yellow bands and these hats. They were unarmed, and yet they got shot at by Russian planes from time to time. and they were out in the middle of nowhere, the Carpathian Mountains, just doing mindless, meaningless tasks sometimes, just to keep them busy, and sometimes doing things like digging ditches and trying to revive or landmines, railroad tracks, airports, that kind of thing. So I'm walking many miles on very, very little food and surviving through all that. And only about 5% of the people in the forced labor camps survived, and they were treated like POWs after the war. They didn't know what to do with them. And for the other Jewish survivors, they were confined to factories and farms. They weren't allowed to go to school yet. They didn't know what to do with them until later. In my dad's case, he was smart and fortunate enough to be go to medical school, and he was one of a 10% Jewish quota. The maximum amount of matriculation was 10% for the Jewish population. My dad was lucky enough, and that was one of the miracles too, is how he actually got into medical school. But brutal
So
time,
so so
forced
let
labor
me
camp.
back up. Let me back up because you glossed over. You almost made you almost described the forced labor camps like a euphemism, and they were bad. They were bad. Just so folks understand who don't know about the Holocaust, these people were thrown into these forced labor camps just because they were Jewish, or in some cases, other nationalities. And they were randomly killed. They were tortured. They were killed. They were forced to work. And if they didn't work or they looked funny, a lot of them were just shot on the spot. It was a terrible, terrible time, and it was simply because and only because of who they were. It wasn't because they committed a crime. It wasn't because they did something bad. It wasn't because they were traitors. It's because they were Jewish in this case. And these poor people, like Robert said, only 5% of them survived, meaning 95% of them were killed,
Or
died,
died of
died.
tuberculosis, pestilence. We
Yeah,
don't talk
yeah,
about pestilence enough, but that's a starvation. That is a serious healthcare
right.
issue, is starvation. It's going on now, as we see, in Gaza and elsewhere, unfortunately. But no, and my dad and his friend Frank had it. They knew the war was coming to an end, and they didn't know if they were on a death march, because we talk about death marches in the Pacific, but not so much in Europe. And they thought that they had no idea where they would be if the Nazis won the war, or if the United States or Russia won the war. They had no idea where they wanted to end up, and all they knew, that they were near the Austrian border. And my dad and his friend Frank's first escape in the middle of nowhere, unbelievable story. And then, we talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, you escaped now, but where are you going to eat? Where are you going to sleep? You don't know where your work is coming from. Even if you try to integrate into civilization at this point, you're still Jewish, and you're still at a high risk of being killed or imprisoned for sure. So so there was that feeling that you had, but they escaped, and then they hid. Actually, they got double crossed. They escaped again in Budapest, across from Nazi headquarters in Budapest. Amazing story, that one too. Split second timing, a lot of luck, the help of God, and amazing that I'm here. Amazing that my dad made it here. And by the time my mom and dad left Hungary, his risk tolerance was so high, because he had no choice. You either escaped or you were dead, and so that's the risk you take. But that's what it is. He would have rather been killed than live as an imprisoned man, or a man under regimes like the Nazis or the communists.
And somehow he made his way to the United States.
Amazing. Not speaking a lick of English, 2 cents in their pockets, and two escapes later. One as a med student, and one with my mom at the end of the Hungarian Revolution in '56. So yeah, and just amazing how they got to the United States. Just a lot of help, a lot of luck. I like to say God, the help of God, of course, and yeah, the United States to finally practice medicine in a free country. That's all he really wanted.
Wow. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, of course. Well, he delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area, which I
Okay.
think is
Well,
that's
good.
redemption. It doesn't bring back the 6 million or the 50 to 60 million, but he did bring life back. And he would have worked till the day he died. And
That is
he was
amazing.
jovial and jolly, and with his demeanor, you'd never know everything he'd gone through. You just never know. And then they educated me about what my mom and dad had gone through a little more so the second half of my life when I wasn't quite as busy, when I had a minute to breathe, and family and friends. And they made a lot of friends from all over the world over time. And I'm trying to do the same thing, which is one of the great things about this journey is learn about other people's culture, educate yourself, and reach out to our fellow man. That is a good start. Reach out to your neighbor. It's a good start in the fight against hate for sure, and the fight against anti-Semitism. No doubt about it.
Isn't that the truth? It's just learning about people. It's putting yourself in the other person's shoes. With the rise of anti-Semitism these days in the United States, I mean, I get it. I mean, people are upset about Gaza. People are upset about Israel's attacks. People are uh, upset about Hamas. I mean, it's an ancient war. But one of the things that is really sad for me is, I mean, we're blaming there are people who are anti-Semites who are blaming people here in the United States for what's going on over there. I mean, Jewish folks are dying. They're getting shot and killed, and they're being. I mean, there's all kinds of harm that's happening, and it's just crazy to me. I think about American Grit, my book, and I think about what happened back then during World War II. Yes, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and yes, there was huge fear that the Japanese were going to invade the west coast of the United States. But that fear led to really, really bad decisions, right? Of rounding up 200,000 people who were of Japanese ancestry, two-thirds of whom were American citizens, and they rounded them up and put them into internment camps. I call them concentration camps, although they weren't killed in these camps like they were in Europe. But they were thrown into these camps in the middle of nowhere in the deserts and swamps of the United States, just simply because of who they were. They were of Japanese ancestry. And all the hate that happened from those times and the fear that happened. And now we look back on it and we say, holy cow, how could that have happened? Well, first of all, it happened. And you know what? If we don't inform people like you and I are, Robert, but if all of us don't educate folks about what's happened in the past, it's going to happen again. I think about Robert things like COVID, right? I mean, people were talking about um, we got to round up all the Chinese people. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? And during 9/11, every Muslims are terrorists. So we need to figure out how to round them up and maybe put them in camps after 9/11. And, the calmer heads prevailed. And I won't go into that. But, I mean, it's crazy what happens when fear takes over and hate takes over. And we got to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen again. Hence, Robert's book, Not a Real Enemy. Robert, why did you call the book Not a Real Enemy? What does that mean?
Great question. And I answered a little bit differently every time. And I could have said it better what you said about Islamophobia and that Asian hate. There's no accountability, there's no education in that. And it wasn't just the Chinese, it was all Asians, unfortunately, that were targeted. And now the Jewish people, unfortunately, for the last couple of years. Not a real enemy was the Russians in their arrogance. The night before my dad's final escape, at the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 56, like I said, his risk tolerance was so high that he snuck into the medical staff office. It was a shambles after the war between security guards. Who knows what the consequences would have been if he were caught? But he wanted to read his dossier and see what the Russians said about him before his escape. Because if they got caught or arrested, he wanted to make sure he had a clean bill of health, so to speak. And that's how they labeled him. They called him not a real enemy, and that was the name of the chapter as well. And they said he was politically immature. The theme resonates throughout the book because, like you said, just being Jewish, he wasn't a real enemy. But in the end, my
Right.
mom was a medical student at the time, and my dad was an established doctor. Both of them working 24/7 during that 2 week war, by the way, doubling down as a trauma surgeon in addition to his OBGYN. But they were a real enemy because they loved Mother Hungary, but they wouldn't buy into Nazi Hungary and Communist Hungary. So the country lost two really good people that would have really contributed to society over the next 20, 30, 40 years had they remained. And let's say the Americans, so not a real enemy was the what the Soviets called them, and that's and but it's a paradox because mom and dad were a real enemy, and no doubt about it, and just they wouldn't stay there at all. And now, like if Americans had rescued Hungary instead of the Soviets, and it was a democratic society like the neighboring countries such as Austria, we wouldn't be having this conversation probably. I would have been raised in Hungary most likely, and if I was lucky enough, getting to medical school there and we'd have this conversation in Hungarian, but it just didn't turn out that way. The communists were really no better to the Jewish people, short of rounding them up and sending them to concentration camps. But they were persecuted for sure. You weren't allowed to have Jewish weddings. You had certain restrictions. Like I said, medical school quotas. To only 10% of the students could be Jewish, that kind of thing. And my mom and dad and all these cloak and dagger stories they had to go through and endure. They just had enough. They just wanted to be free. And unfortunately, my mom was 13 months away from graduating medical school. She never got to go back, but she worked research and she's a Holocaust educator. She was a history
Yeah.
educator, and they were well recognized and well liked in the medical society, the Jewish community, and through everybody they met. They touched. And I guess I'm just trying to spin off a little bit of that this in the same way. But not a real enemy was what the Soviets call him, and in the end he wasn't, but in the end he was. It's a real paradox. It's a real great title, and
What
my,
what do you
my
what
co-author
what do
thought
you
of it too, by the
what
way.
what do you mean? What do you mean when you say they? I get that they were not a real enemy, but what do you mean when you say they were real enemies? Your
Because
mom
they,
and dad?
they left the country because they hated it so much that they left. And so they were an enemy in the fact that they covertly hated the communists, but they wouldn't share their feelings with other medical
You
students.
know, that is. I mean, you talk about freedom of speech. I mean, w- we
It's
would
fear.
not when
It's
people
fear.
when if an American, if any one of us says we don't like this country, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's your right, right? That doesn't make us an enemy, right? But
Correct.
in Hungary, where your parents were, that made them an enemy of the state. And understanding things like that in terms of what we have in this country, it's amazing. It's incredible the freedom that we have in the country and that in this country, and that was just one part of it. You know, I want to ask you a question, and this is a sincere question, and maybe it's an ignorant question,
The-
but the anti-Semitism, you know, it was happening. It's for a long time, right? I mean, the rise of it is happening because of what's going on in Gaza, I think, but it was there since World War II. It was there prior to World War II. Why? What? I mean, what is it about Jewish people that makes people feel the way they do?
it's a loaded question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I
I
can
know,
I,
right?
I can take you back even farther. Let's go back to Exodus. Let's go back to the 400 years of slavery where the Hebrews, the Israelites, were slaves under the Pharaohs. It
Right.
goes back far. And then the Philistines and Samson and Delilah, Samson and Delilah and many, many, many stories. And not only the Jews, I mean, the Christians and the Muslims back in the 500 years ago, 800 years ago, there's always some kind of hate. There's always some kind of scapegoat. And it's not just Jewish people. The African Americans had to deal with that for a very long period of time.
Right.
The advent of slavery. I don't understand it. I'm trying to wrap my arms around it. I'm trying to recruit people to help me wrap my arms around it and prevent it from happening again. Education is a big thing. Great people like you that take the time to listen and to discuss this. That's what's important, and hopefully that helps keep the peace. Why Jewish people are targeted? I don't know. Is it jealousy? Is it education? Is it just a different? People are different, and some people just can't handle that. They don't like different people. I'm the opposite. I want to learn about different people. I want to learn about their cultures.
Right.
I want to integrate with other people. That's what's going to help. And yeah, like you said, 50, 80, 60, 100 years ago, the song remains the same. It's different ways of torturing each other, maiming, killing, persecuting. but it's still the song remains the same. And it's as a radiologist, as a doctor, we're into the preservation of the human body, the beauty of the cell, the anatomy, the way the body works. And people like Hamas lauding Hitler, which is something else I can't understand, or African Americans in this country, very disturbing when they're lauding Hitler or talking crap against the Jews. Just I can't understand it. But whereas we are into the preservation of life, all types of life, Hamas wouldn't think twice about chopping somebody's head off or torturing them or killing
Right.
in different ways. Just same thing, but different ways of doing it, and it's shameful. It's just so hard to understand, and I guess that's my life's mission now is just trying to figure it out and educate people as to why it's wrong, and not simply from concentration camps like Auschwitz, where my dad's parents were killed, but my dad himself having to suffer. He was useful because he was a young man, and that usefulness brought him a lot of suffering anyway, a lot of torture. Amazing to survive. So it's hard to. I don't get it. I mean, even the Orthodox prisoners in my dad's prison of war camp. We don't talk about this much. They shunned the non-Orthodox, even though they were all in the same. They were in the same tent, the same camp, the same crappy shelter. They shunned them, and it was like, you guys, you should be together as a team. My dad was a team player, as were his friends. So those were enemies of my father and his friends that you would never. And then the bullies from my dad's high school that used to pick on him, they were there a year ahead of my father beforehand, and they were the nicest. They were the nicest guys to my dad and his friends because they were in the same boat, and they realized we really have to pull together here. We got to in any way we can to survive, whether it's sharing food, keeping your mouth shut, behaving appropriately, whatever it takes. Integrity is it's a theme that we bring up quite a bit in presentations, and integrity it's on every page with my dad and his friends because if you didn't have that, your life was certainly at risk.
That what you said a little bit earlier about, what your dad went through and millions and millions and millions of people dying at the hands of really bad people, and him coming to the United States and bringing 10,000 new lives into onto planet Earth, right? I mean, how beautiful is that? And as you were talking, maybe it is as simple as the fact that we're just different. Everybody's different, right? And maybe there is a streak of that streak of, I don't know. I hate to use the word hate, but just non-love, if you
I,
will.
I love the
I,
word. Well,
it's
you and
just
we talked earlier about, you said the opposite of love was fear. And I see that. I'll buy into that because I think that's what's happening in North Korea and Gaza and Iran and what happened in the communist regime and before that. But I think the opposite of love is apathy. I think the opposite of love is indifference. So we can discuss that as well. But no, I agree. People are, and we all have this predisposed. We judge a person by their cover when we first meet them. But give me
right.
30 seconds. Give me 20, 30, 60 seconds to talk to somebody, and then I'll know whether they're going to be a good friend of mine or not. And believe me, I try to. It's hard here in Florida. There's 25 million people here. If I remember right, you're from California, so it's overwhelming how big the population is, and it's hard to like the guy in front of you in a traffic jam, of course, but you try to
Right.
understand they're in the same boat that you are, and we're spoiled that way. We don't want to wait 5 minutes at McDonald's for our takeout. We don't understand that. At least you've got food there. At least it's amazing what we have in this country, and you like your government and you don't. But I hate this right and left and center of the aisle that we should come together politically a little more. And unfortunately, I think it takes events like World War II and 9/11 for us to do that, and the coronavirus epidemic. And it's sad that it takes a tragedy like that for us to come together because we are people. And I recently did a podcast where the guy said, we're one race. We have different amounts of melanin in our skin, but even albinos have melanin. We're all the same. We're the same race, and let's try to behave that way instead of alienating each other. It's just not, and it's going to happen. But in my case, no, it's not on my watch. It's not going to happen. We're going to educate people and say, Hungarians are fun people. Jewish people can be fun people. We can also be serious. We can be
That's
right. I
right.
love music. I like sports. I mean, we can talk for hours about all sports, music, foodie stuff, golf. I mean, you name it. I don't just do. I mean, I don't have to be doing this for what I'm doing, but I'm doing it because I'm just trying to help out society in my own little way. But yeah, I like to have fun too. And people that know me, people that know you, obviously, they want to hang around you. They want to be like you. They want to have a guy that's got some kind of charisma, not some lonely, sad, depressed person. And there's treatment for that too. I think that's a part of these protests too, is whether it's boredom, depression, jealousy, poverty. I'm not, this sheep, this herd mentality. There's a lot of reason. Education at home, predisposed prejudice at home, and I think education starts at home too, and in the classroom.
Oh,
And
no doubt.
it's the responsibility of, if the parents and the teachers don't do it, then it's you and I doing it. And I think that's my goal here. That's my main, is get the story in the classroom, to teach people about how hate can kill, and how what happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. Local government, foreign government, natural disaster, anything like that can certainly end up happening to you or me, and a bad neighbor, and we could be on the run ourselves, unfortunately, not knowing where your next job, meal, place to sleep, that
Yeah.
kind of, never know.
Yeah. It's really interesting. My dad used to say every generation needs its war. And I think what he meant by that, as you were speaking, was, bad stuff brings people together, right? We saw it, like you said, 9/11 and coronavirus and these things that really, you see hurricanes and tornadoes that happen. It brings people together, right? And unfortunately, that might just be human nature. But I think, for me, I like to leave people with some ideas and some thoughts with regards to what we're talking about. One of the things that is a theme in my book, that is happening these days, is victimhood. You know, um, you can, and the one thing that leads to victimhood is blame. When you blame others for your circumstances, you blame others for what's going on in your life. If you're not happy, you're making yourself a victim, because you know what, you can do some, I don't care how bad your life is. There's something you can do about it. And these guys, and there are a bunch of guys, young men in the Japanese American concentration camps that decided they weren't going to blame the United States government. They weren't going to become victims. Of course, they were victims, but they decided that they weren't going to allow themselves uh, to enter into the club of victimhood, and they actually volunteered to fight and die for the United States Army, who put them and their families in those camps to begin with. And they joined a segregated war unit of Japanese Americans called the 442nd. And the 442nd went on to become the most decorated war unit in the history of the United States for size and duration. They didn't blame. They said, you know what? I want us and our families to get the hell out of these camps. And the way that they decided to do it was to prove their loyalty. And that's a story I want everybody to understand and know, right? It's your choice to blame others. It's your choice to blame the Jews. It's your choice to blame the Japanese, right? But don't. Right? I
Well,
mean,
it's
help
overcompensation. I love that
help the
story.
process.
I didn't know that about the Japanese. And 500,000 Jewish Americans fought in World War II, by the way, including my
Right?
mom's boyfriend after my dad passed. He left Hungary before my parents did, and he came back and fought in Europe. So I love that story that you're saying, because yeah, you shouldn't have to prove yourself, but you do what you have to do to convince
Yeah.
people that you're not the real enemy, that you're not that guy, you're not that girl. So
Yeah. And take it up. Take it up, right? I mean, if you see bad stuff happening, um, take it up, right? And don't blame. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's at the highest levels of our government, right? I mean, you look at the left and you look at the right, they're blaming each other all the time. I mean, you guys chill,
I can't stand
chill,
that.
right?
I can't stand
And
it.
it's we don't even. I mean, I've seen interviews where people have said, I refuse to talk to somebody if I find out they're a Republican. Are you kidding me? Same thing with the Democrat. And it's just nuts. And you know what? I just feel like these people just have too much time on their hands.
That's a good song by Styx. Yeah,
Yeah.
too much time on my hands. I agree. That's always a dangerous thing for people like us. When I'm working in the medical, always busy all day, and the people that would blame us or criticize us or backstab us, they had too much time on their hands, and
And you know what?
that
You
thing
know what?
goes back. That goes back
I'll tell.
way back.
Yeah, and I just thought of something. When I was a kid growing up, um, I worked every summer, every day of every summer since I was from when I was 12 years old. And my dad later told me, he says, John, the reason why I gave you those work opportunities was one to learn how to work. He says, but number two, is keep you out of trouble. Keep you out of trouble. Because you know what? People who've got eh, you have time. We all have the same amount of time. The question is, what you going to do with it? And
Agreed. No, I
if you
agree.
don't fill that time with productive stuff, like you were just talking about, there's a risk you're gonna fill it with unproductive time. And which leads me to the second thing. So I think the second thing I want to leave with folks next to don't blame and don't be a victim, right? Is find your purpose. And there's I my purpose in life is to make this world better than the day I landed on it. That is my purpose in life. And however I do that, whether it be my podcast or the work that I do or the people just do stuff to make things better and not
Agreed.
to make things worse.
Completely agree. Change vectors. Don't go protest
Change
at a
vectors.
university that you and I would give our left, you know what, to go to, and never mind our kids, which I would pull right off the campus and slap a lawsuit on
Yes.
them right away. Not to mention call the governor and whatever. It's another topic. But I'd hate to do that. But your vector, go part time, spend more time with your family, volunteer somewhere, give back to the community, read a couple of good books, write a book, write a play, write an opera, travel, just meet your neighbor, buy your neighbor a cup of coffee, something like that. Just don't sit there and yada yada yada, and this is the fault of this and this and that. Because, like you said, Gaza has nothing to do with you or me. It's got nothing to do with 100 years ago, but the torture and the treatment of other human beings is that's the thing. I mean, that's what we're here fighting.
That's
And
exactly right.
you don't have the right. You can protest against Israel and Palestine, but you don't get the right to kill me or you or starve me to death because of your opinions. You're allowed to have your opinion, but I'm trying to get in my car to go to work or to buy a gift for somebody. You don't get to tell me how to practice my religion or how long I get to live. That's in God's hands. I mean, that's if you believe in God. And go to church or synagogue more often. A little religion never hurt anybody. You don't have to. You can be atheist or agnostic, but you don't get to tell me that I can't practice Judaism or whatever. And we're a small minority. There's only 16 or 17 million Jews on this planet, whereas there's 1.3 to 1.5 billion Chinese and Indians, Muslims, and Christians. So that's probably 80% of the world's population, maybe more. And we're a small minority, but we're hanging in tough. Thank God we're not an endangered species. And I hope it never, the Hitler and those and his Quislings sure tried to make it that way, that we were endangered species. And thank God, they estimate now there'd be about 41 million Jews on this planet if it weren't for the Holocaust. So that's quite a difference in population.
Wow.
That's a
Wow.
I bet you never heard that one, right? I mean,
No, I didn't. From today, you're saying that if Holocaust didn't happen, it wouldn't
about
be at
41
16
million.
million.
They estimated 41 million. And if you go to Brooklyn, New York, last time I was there a few years ago, but all the Orthodox women they had these three seat carriages that they were rolling around with, loaded with kids. So I was glad to see that people were being fruitful and multiplying. Because I never thought I'm going to stereotype. I never thought of Jewish families being that large, but I have a
Yeah.
cousin who's got 6 or 7 kids in Jerusalem, and I love it. And they're not fearful for their lives, even though. And I was the same way. I was in Israel about a year to the date before the Gaza event, before October 7th. I never felt safer. And we need that in this country too. I think we need a little more military and police presence at churches, museums, synagogues, schools. We just had about a school shooting
Oh
in
my gosh.
Minneapolis. It happens all
Yeah.
too often. What is so hard? That our president wants to protect DC, which I get. I was in DC, and even the cops there were. I asked one of the policemen for directions, and he was telling me how scary the streets were. Even he was scared. This is an armed policeman. But I think the rest of our cities have that right too. We have the right to our protection, and that would help with the schools, the protests, these random killings. It doesn't hurt. Just and in Israel, these kids were all 18, 19, 20 years old. I mean, they barely were shaving. They were like my granddaughter's age, but believe me, if they saw malfeasance, don't expect them to stand around. They're going to protect you, and I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And not just the U.S., Canada. Canada's a disaster. Australia, parts of Europe. Amsterdam Publishers, my own publishing company. She's a Christian lady, and all she does is publish books about the Holocaust. And I think she's got the courage of say, David and Goliath. I mean, her courage. And Amsterdam is bad too with the protests, beatings, protests, people diving into the water just to protect themselves and then not get beaten up. That kind of just horrifying. And people killed in the United States. A Jewish president of a synagogue in Detroit, a 65-year-old man in Los Angeles, and it's ongoing. So just a little extra protection. We're on the right end of the gun so far. We're on the right end of the muzzle, but I hope it stays that way because sure wasn't like that in Hungary. You were always on the wrong end of the gun for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot we can do. And, but it all starts with you and me. It starts with you out there. If you kind of take up the banner of love,
Nothing
you
wrong with that.
know, just switch vectors.
You like that
Like
word
Robert
now.
just,
Yeah,
I
pivot. I
do.
like pivot.
That's like,
Pivot is a
yeah,
good word too,
pivot.
but I
Pivot's
save
a
that
good
for
word.
basketball. Nothing like a good pivot, free yourself up for that open jump shot. But it's a good word, pivot.
That's
Yeah,
it.
you don't have to love everybody, and in the end, we die alone. In the end, you might die with 20 or 100 or 500 friends, but you're going to be selective about those friends. But that doesn't mean you can't be nice to the guy next to you on the
Right.
street or in the restaurant or at the library, wherever you happen to be. I love going to concerts and seeing people that are interested in the same kind of music that I am, because we can talk for hours about what Pat Metheny and Herbie Hancock and Pink Floyd, name your Poison. Even Poison, we met the guy from Poison once, which was kind of cool. He invited us to his show. So it's nice to try to find something in common with other people. Sports events is another good example. You go to sports events, you talk about not only football or baseball, whatever event you happen to be at, but other sports, great athletes, the history of sports, always fascinating. That kind of thing. You can always find something in common with somebody. There's always going to be something just to break the ice for sure.
We have something in common with every person on this planet. We do.
Amen.
We
Amen. And it's
do.
not
There's
just
just no
DNA.
question.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
just DNA.
We
It's
exactly. And we do. And it's taking that time and like you said, taking that 15 or 30 seconds to just talk for a little bit. And it just yeah, so it's really interesting, Robert, because we started this conversation wanting to talk about your dad's experience in Nazi Hungary and how bad things were, and you know, it all distills down to love. That's what it does. Every conversation I've had, no matter how hard I try, in terms of how to make things better, ends up it's about love. And
Yeah, no doubt. Even in the forced labor camps, there were nicer guards who would actually they would sneak in sausages and or they would turn it,
yeah,
because these men never ate meat. I mean, they were barely enough to get by.
yeah.
And people, the farmers nearby, but there were nicer guards. There were people that actually were kind to the Jewish people. They empathized and that's we stress that. I mean, during that was what the message that I brought out of it was that you can survive. It's hard to survive alone, but it's nice to survive with the right people on your side. And my dad was fortunate enough to experience that and to have the right friends and to run into the right people. And it's just so many miraculous stories that my dad finding out what happened to his parents at Auschwitz was a miracle. That months after the war, he had no idea what happened to him. He was away at forced labor camp when they were taken off. And that was the fastest expulsion. That was the fastest collection and extermination of people in World War II was in Hungary, 43 and especially 1944. And my dad had no idea what was going on. Went back to his home in Budapest after the war was finally over and found Christian people living in his house and nothing in the home that he recognized. Very that had to be one of the most empty feelings that he could have. That and finding out what happened to his parents. Just you can hear your ears ringing when you think about when you hear bad news and your ears start to ring or you get distracted or your mind drifts. I can't. I mean, I put myself in my dad's place when he had to experience that kind of thing.
Man, man. Yeah. All right. Well, one of the things that you said about your dad was that to survive, he surrounded himself. He got together with other people. And I'll tell you something, that is something I encourage everybody today to do. Right? Surround yourself with like-minded people. Surround yourself with friends who are going to lift you and who you're going to lift. And it makes survival and it makes life so much easier, right?
All about
And
the team. All
and
about the
it's
team.
and we don't have to do this alone. Y'all don't have to do this alone. It makes life a whole lot more fun. Love is a lot more fun than hate, isn't it? It
Oh, way
really is.
better. Not
And
even close.
and,
Yeah,
and
hate
you
never did
know,
anything
and
good.
it's
Maya Angelou, right? I mean, hate never did anything good. Just love is
and
the
it's
answer.
so much more productive, so much more productive. So try it. Even in try it in an easy situation and try it in a tough situation. Someone who you think that you'd never get along with. I mean, some of y'all Democrats out there and Republicans, try talking to one another. You might like it.
That is so poignant. I have a truck driver now I can call a friend, but back in the day when I lived in Massachusetts, I thought he could have been a neo-Nazi or a skinhead or a white supremacist. That was the impression I had of him. You know what? Last week he bought 4 books. He bought an audio book and he bought 3 books as gifts to different people, and he loved the book and he's gonna listen to it again. And I'm so I got to teach myself my own lesson that you just cannot you can judge a book by its cover. I mean, I guess that's an expression that's really not true. But yeah, you shouldn't judge a book by it. So you shouldn't judge people by just their looks or the tattoo or their beard or whatever the case may be. Because we said this before when we talked that somebody's got a story out there. If somebody's having a bad day, they're going to show it, and you have to understand that you could have that bad day too. And you know what your behavior is like on a bad day, a disappointing day, death of a member of a family, that kind of thing. That's or I mean, rejection, somebody just saying something not naughty to you, nasty to you that sticks with you, those kind of things. We got to move on and go past that. But people do have bad days, and we have to understand that as well.
And
There's
just
no,
understand, folks, that everybody you look at has got something going on worse than you.
amen.
Everybody. And, you know, if we kind of carry that with us, might help. Might allow for just a little bit more patience, a little more compassion, maybe, God forbid, a little more love. But with that, Robert, this has been wonderful. This has been wonderful. The story about your parents and what they did and the grit, right? My book is called American Grit. I mean, the grit and the survival experiences that they went through. Um, and look at what they built. Look at what they built despite all of it. And what they're going to be remembered for forever. So, with that, Robert, thank you for joining me. I love you. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless everybody. All you out there, learn, learn. Pick up Robert's book if you want it. If you want to get a perspective on how bad things can get, pick up Robert's book. It'll make you appreciate things a whole lot more. Not a Real Enemy. You can get it on Amazon. And Robert, do you have a website?
I do. It's robertjwolfmd.com, loaded
Oh,
with
look at that. It's
uh,
right there.
It's oh yeah, there it is. I got a new background, so I keep forget what it's. I love the background
Very
being
cool.
in Florida, but yeah, no, robertjwolfmd.com, YouTube channel. I'm on socials all over
Okay.
the place. You can find me. I'm not hard to.
Yeah,
Appreciate your mentioning me and the website and taking the time to talk about this. And I still
you
need to
bet.
read American Grit. It's on my list, and now that we've had this chat, it's on top. It moves up to the top of the list for sure because it's important.
Wonderful.
Like you said, little known parts of history need to
That's
be
right.
taught. They
That's
really need
right.
to be reiterated.
That's right. Because, you think about it, folks, history is kind of repeating itself right now as we speak. Stop it. Love y'all. Bye.